Reformed Church.
You know, there are different things that you can be overburdened with, like you can be overburdened with work. So that's just, you know, even though we're Christians, or obviously non-Christians have the same problem, but, you know, you could be a Christian or a non-Christian, and you're just overburdened by just trying to work, to get things right yourself, to fix something yourself. To, you know, it's a very difficult way to live. It's a hard way. It's a hard weight to carry. So that's definitely, you know, an example of being just overburdened, where you're overburdened with work. I mean, the reality actually is that with any problem that you have, and it could be something like sickness, it could be disease, it could be pain in your body, it could be problems at your job, it could be people around you. I mean, problems, they come in all shapes and sizes, right? But the reality of the fact is that every single problem that we have, and we know this, but it's just, you know, I guess, let me tell you this before I keep going on that. Because I almost was about to say, you know, I know that you know this, but it is good for us to remember this. But it's even more than that it's good for us to remember, is that if you have someone like the Apostle Paul, right, that in 2 Corinthians 12, he writes about it, where he pleaded with the Lord so many times repeatedly for the Lord to take something from him. You know, here's a man, obviously, that he knows the Lord, right? I mean, he was growing in the abundance of revelations of God, but yet was dealing with something that was really things that were being spoken to him. I mean, at least the way he categorizes it is a messenger of Satan that was sent to buffet him. So when you read a messenger of Satan, then it was something that was being spoken to him, right? But he was overburdened with that to the point that it was a repeated thing. Like, he's thinking, I don't know what he was thinking. You know, is God not answering me, or what is this? Like, I mean, obviously, it sounds like there's a little bit of an annoyance, you know, or maybe I'm adding the annoyance to it. But like, I asked you 3 times to take this from me, right? Sounds a little bit annoyed, but the reality is that you know, it is. I mean, there are lots of things that we know. But if you ask me, you know what, do we need to be reminded every single day of our lives of the reality of our circumstances, the reality of what we have in Jesus, the reality of what things are actually really like for us? You know, because there's not probably a single person that's even here or probably will ever listen to this unless they have come to full knowledge of Jesus, that doesn't at one point or another get overburdened with something, right? Whether it be, I mean, and overburden just simply means is you're taking more upon yourself, right, than you need to. In other words, you're taking things upon yourself that have nothing to do with knowing Jesus Christ, right? Right? And if you're taking that upon yourself, right, that's how you get overburdened, right? Because there is one burden that the Lord has given us, and that is to know him, right? His yoke is easy and his burden is light. So, I mean, you could name it. It doesn't matter. You could say, well, surely the knowledge of work, you know, Jesus can't help me with that. That's not true, right? It doesn't. I mean, the Lord can give you the wisdom that you need to be able to coordinate your hands for crafts, or he could coordinate your brain and put the things in there that you need to be able to reason and discern things and look at problems and decipher and solve and to do, right? So that the same God that made your brain is the same one that knows what you need when it comes to your work, when it comes to, you know, raising a family, when it comes to dealing with people, when it comes to patience, when it comes to temperance, when it comes to anything in your life, right? I mean, he is the one, right, that you can rely on for everything. So there's no such thing as, okay, the things that the Lord, that I need to do, let's put it like this, the things that I need to do in my life to succeed is following Jesus and then work hard at work, right? It's not really the case. We don't have more than one burden to carry, right? And what we should be doing is knowing Jesus and acknowledging him in all our ways, right? All of our ways, that without exception, right? Knowing Jesus and acknowledging him in all our ways. And that, obviously, it was the answer to Paul. It's the answer to us today for any area in our lives, right? It's always the same thing. It's acknowledging the Lord in all of our ways so that everything that Jesus died, right, and bled and suffered to give us, right, so that we could take advantage of those things. You know, the reality of the circumstance that we live in is that if you look at this from God's perspective, which is how we want to see it, actually, even better, I won't get into it too much, but I was talking with Miss Kim yesterday. We went on a walk, and I was just talking to her about I've been thinking a lot about desires and what I want, right? And it is an interesting thing that when you look at what you want, right, the more and more that you know the Lord, when you look at what you want, even in the face of any temptation, even in the face of a circumstance, you know, in the face of somebody yelling in your face, right? It could be anything like that. But if you look at, you know, what do I really want to do? Let's say you have somebody screaming in your face, right? You may have a brief temptation to pop them in the nose, right? I mean, that may be something, right? You just want to pop them in the nose just one time. Not real hard, just want to pop them in the nose one time, right? Or you may think, you know, Lord, what do I really want? And if you really think about, like, what do I really want? I want this person to really come to know you, Jesus, to have the same knowledge of your goodness that I have, to be able to see you in the same light that I see you. Like, if you really got down to what you really want, I mean, that's really what you would want for them. So I'm not exactly sure how I'm getting on that, but the point is, though, that you know, when I think where I was going was when you think about when you're working or doing anything, what you really want to do is you don't want to be the one to shine in your job or to shine in the circumstance, or for your wife or your husband to look at you, or for your friends to look at you and tell you how great you are, right? What you really want is for the glory of God to be seen and for God to receive the glory as his power is working in and through you. That's really what you want. That's really what you desire, right? I mean, granted, there are, you know, fleshly desires, carnal desires that we still have left in us that are contrary. But the funny thing is, more and more that you think about that, they are contrary really to what you want, because more and more you knowing the Lord, what you want is what the Lord wants, right? In other words, the Lord's desires, as you continue to delight yourself in him, which is, you know, we'll get to that in a separate message again, just to talk about that a bit. But as you delight yourself in him, the Lord's desires are your desires in a really good part. Even in things, can I tell you something? Even some of the guilt that comes after people do things wrong are because in reality, they don't want to live like that. They don't want to be addicted to drugs. They don't want to live in that way. But yet, you know, things happen that way. So, and it's a little different than people that just don't know the Lord, that don't want to keep hurting their family or whatever like that. But it's a lot of times is as a Christian, you have a desire, you know that you were meant for more. You know that you want more. And then you're looking at this thing, you're like, why am I involved in this stuff, right? So there is a real good indication in a lot of ways of that what you want and what the Lord wants are very tightly knit together in many, many circumstances in your life and in many thoughts in your heart. So as you look, you know, instead of us being overburdened by life and things and circumstances and people and you know, even when I said circumstances there, you know, there was a time years ago when I used to ask the Lord to just, you know, Lord, if I could just be separate from everything, like if I could be separate from like the media and separate from television. I mean, honestly, sometimes I would look at the way the Amish live and I would think maybe that's not such a bad idea, right, to live that way. So you could just be away from everything. But in reality, the thing is that that type of isolationism, right, is of very little value, Scripture says, right, to the gratification of the flesh, right? It's a very little value, because our problem is not that things go wrong around us. Our problem with being overburdened is not because you see something, right? Because you see problems. It's not because you hear people cursing up a storm. It's not because you see things on TV. It's not, you know, because you're in this world. You're going to see stuff. You're going to hear stuff, right? So it's not that our purity or that the way for us to be more spiritual is by being isolated. But in reality, actually, is that we have the capability in any circumstance to be people that are walking by the Spirit of God, which means, right, that we are led by the Spirit of God. Our mind, our decisions, the way we work, the way we do things are all by the same Spirit that the Father has, right? That it's by the Spirit that we possess, same Spirit that the Father has, and we can live and work that way right in the center of everything, right? And the thing actually, funny enough, years ago that I think caught my eye one time, and that's what I used to hold on to, was how Lot was tormented. It says that he was a righteous man, but that his righteous soul was tormented because he lived in Sodom and Gomorrah. But yet, the thing is, you're comparing yourself to somebody like that, right, that doesn't have what you have, right? He didn't have what we have. He wasn't made a new creation, right? He didn't have the mind of Christ the way we have the mind of Christ. So we obviously have no need, even living in the same circumstance that he was living in, yet we could live led by the Spirit of God, not overburdened by the things that are around us, but living in success and living in prosperity in the center of that whole mess, right, which is actually the world. And then, a lot of the things later on, and I'll stop here, but a lot of the things that the Lord started a long time ago reminding me of and teaching me of was that and I've talked to you guys about that many, many times, about how Jesus said, I'm not asking you to take them out of the world, but that you keep them. And the Lord doesn't keep us by isolating us, right? The Lord keeps us, right, by his Spirit on the inside of us and the renewing of our mind, right? In other words, we're kept as we keep our eyes on the Lord, right? And he keeps working in your mind and working in your heart, working in your mind and working in your heart, changing your desires. So even regardless of what you see or what you hear, you know what? Just because you hear people talking a certain way doesn't mean you have to talk a certain way. Just because people around you do one thing or another doesn't mean you have to do one thing or another, right? We are really, and I know I'm getting into a little bit of what I said I wasn't going to get into, but we are people that we are not in the flesh anymore. We're in the Spirit now. And that is a humongous difference, right? Because if you're in the flesh, then you act like people that live in the flesh, right? But if you're in the Spirit, then that means regardless of the circumstance you're in, you're a spiritual individual. These are carnal, earthly people, right? And it's definitely not the same thing, right? It's not the way to live. We don't live the same way. We don't act the same way. We don't think the same way. We don't have the same mind, so that's all good stuff.
We hope you enjoyed this message from Reformed Church. If you have, please share this with someone else and help us get this uncommon truth out to the world. If you'd like to support this good news, you can do so at reformedchurch.com/give. Also on our website, you can take advantage of our free messages, articles, and even full discipleship courses. Start reforming your mind now at reformedchurch.com.